let's start with episode 10. This episode is dealing with weson gangs and all, so it's pretty cool. The first thing I like about it is the fact that you get to see Hank act just like a normal human. Like, in the very beginning of the series, in episode 1, the pilot, you hear him mention something about the fact that he's been through multiple divorces, and throughout the series you keep hearing these nods to him when it comes to not having the best love life. And you get to see a moment of him almost having a good life, and then it ends badly. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's also nice being able to see that, okay, yeah, we've heard hints that they're all like weson gangs. Now we know this is what they're like. Gangs, but weson-based ones. Thought those were cool. That's what the whole thing with Hank, you have it so, you know, like, he tries to date this girl, who her brother was the one who witnessed this brutal killing of this one gang member. And he's a witness. And they go into protected custody. At the end of the episode, it gets revealed that both of them are also weson. And so now Hank is like, okay, the one, like, I was trying to fall for this girl, and she's a weson. And she's like, I'm okay with this, but she wasn't okay with dating him because she's like, okay, I don't want to date you because I'm a weson and all, and it's too complicated and all, and you're, you know, best friends with a Grimm. And so, sadly, they don't get together in this episode. But still, you know, I thought it was a nice moment of being able to see him like, okay, this is him put on his charm and being a human. I also like the fact that, you know, getting to the cliffhanger from the last episode, how, you know, you have the abusive husband show up of Juliet's friend. At the beginning of the episode, Nick reveals to Juliet that, guess what, your friend is a weson. And so now the whole episode, Juliet is trying to convince her friend that it's okay that she's a weson and that she's willing to admit it. And at the close to the very end of the episode, you have it so she finally just blurts out, okay, I'm dating a Grimm, it's okay. Yeah. And, you know, like every weson, freaks out because it's a Grimm, trying to leave, and at that very moment, the abusive husband shows back up, and he attacks them. The thing I really like about this whole storyline was that was not just you had that moment of, you know, him figuring out that, guess what, his wife's friend's boyfriend is a Grimm, but the big thing is I love it how you get to see, and really with any abusive relationship in a movie, you should have it this way, it wasn't Nick who took down the man, it was the women, and that's not coming from a feminist angle. That's just, I think it's a really good way to deal with those type of storylines, is being like, yeah, guess what? It's not this dashing hero who comes in and saves us today. No, she has to stand up, and she has to fight her own battle and get rid of that guy. And guess what? She does. And I thought that was really great. This episode was pretty solid. Moving on to the next episode. Warning, this next episode has some very dark subject matter in it. So continue with your best judgment. Let's go. I'll just throw it straight out there. One of the big things this episode is dealing with is the gang rape of a woman. It doesn't show it, but it's a big plot point of this episode. Basically what happens is these sergeants in the military who gang raped this woman, and now she's coming to try to get them to actually admit that they did that because they got away with it. And, you know, suddenly they're all being killed by a creature that's basically a manticore. And so, you know, these people being killed by from the tails of the manticore. The big problem I did have with this episode is just the fact of, okay, so you reveal in the end of the episode that it wasn't her who was doing it, it was the sergeant, because he felt like she never got justice for what happened. And so he's killing them. But the only problem is, I wish they had actually kept that a secret until the very end. They did still have a plot twist at the very end. But anyways, I would say this episode's solid. I think this is a really good episode. Very dark subject matter. But I think introduced very interesting weson that's going to be coming up later in very important ways. And so, yeah, I enjoyed it. The next episode, episode 12, is the episode that introduced a villain that's actually going to go into the next episode 13 too, which we'll talk about next week. But basically this weson is obsessed with, you know, he scalps people, makes cloaks out of their hair because he thinks it makes them more powerful. And basically what he's doing is he's going after police officers because, you know, warriors, they're the best, right? But now his big goal is to go after Nick as a Grimm. We can talk more about him in the next video, but for right now, we'll move on to another thing that happened in this episode that's important, and that is that Rosalie and Monroe gets engaged, and Monroe's parents show up. And that's where we lead off the episode with. They had a fight because they didn't know that she was not a blue button, and so they freak out, like, why you mix marriages? Like, then hints of racism in Grimm sometimes, and it's in a good, I almost said in a good way. Racism is not in a good way, but it's in a way that's like not promoting racism. But in the same way, it's like you do have to wonder, as we talked in one of our last episodes, how does it really work with mixed marriages between different weson groups? But anyways, his parents are old school and they don't like this mixed marriage stuff, and so they freak out. She leaves, and then the big problem comes because Nick, wanting to figure out what's going on with this new killer, goes to Monroe like normal and find his parents there, and they really freak out now, knowing it's Grimm. And the episode just ends with a Grimm, and then boom, fades to black. And that's where we leave off this video in our next episode. Yeah, stay tuned for that. But anyways, my thoughts about these episodes were, again, not my favorite episodes. I think season 3 is filled with a lot of episodes I'm like, these are great episodes, but still not my favorite episodes. Like, as I mentioned in a comment on my season 2 review, honestly, I feel like season 5 might be the best season because it's where everyone's at their highest point. Everyone's top of their game. You have Nick, the best Grimm he can be. You have Trouble, which we'll talk about in 2 episodes from now. But you also have all these other characters who just at the top of the game, and you're going to hear me talk about them more as these videos for season 3 comes out. But really, just season 5 is really where everyone's at the top of their game, and so I like it because of that. But the point is, I still love this season, and yeah, these episodes are great. Tell me your thoughts below. Thank you guys for watching. Peter Wary, signing off.